to Thaddaus Dawson Speaks, Liberation Through Valuation Where Soul Meets Soil. Today we have a very exciting episode. It'll just be me and Rick here today. And what we'll be talking about is my recent testimony in front of the Federal Reserve EGRPRA Committee. And EGRPRA stands for Economic Growth and Regulatory Paper Reduction Act. So I always end up speaking in acronyms and industry language. And Rick always brings me back down to earth so it can be open and communicative to the everyday person. So also, EGRPRA was passed in 1996 and requires federal banking regulators, the Fed and the OCC and FDIC, to review their regulations every 10 years and identify rules that are outdated, unnecessary, or overly burdensome. The idea was to cut red tape for banks, but the public hearing process is also an opening for advocates to get reform demands into the federal record, which is exactly how I used the platform on March 26th, where the actual hearing was in Washington, D.C., and I presented from New Orleans, where earlier that same day I had made a presentation at the Policy Center's national board meeting. So it was a pretty whirlwind day. And it was pretty exciting for me. However, those 2.5 minutes, I was extremely nervous all day in preparation, and I was probably rambling at the earlier presentation because I knew I only had 2.5 minutes. So without further ado, I'll bring in our producer, Rick Clear, so we can start the conversation. Rick,
hey,
you're awfully dressed up there. I didn't know this was a full episode.
Well, I just came in time to do the show, so I'm like this. But I did undo my collar, so I can.
Oh, okay.
So anyway, but it's good to see you. Good to see you. And by the way, let me just tell you, okay, first of all, my always disclaimer is that, no, I am not a real estate professional, appraiser professional in any way, shape, or form, but I am a video producer here in Atlanta, and I work for a lot of groups, and one of those is for Thaddaus. And as I follow him around, Thaddaus, I am so impressed by what you do because it affects so many. And hey, I'm a property owner, so it affects me, and I've learned so much. So I'm always happy to come on here because sometimes I get to ask the questions of you that I want to ask when we're out somewhere, and that's really not the place for me to ask them. It's other people that can ask them at that point. So, but you did have a busy week. Hey, one thing though, quick, as your producer, if people want to see your appearance in front of the Federal Reserve Board, the GRIP group, they can just look on the YouTube channel here. It's right down here below. They can find it.
And what's the YouTube channel?
What's the YouTube channel? 10K Appraisal Foundation?
No. Yes, it is, but it's Thaddaus Dawson Speaks, 10K BA Appraisal Podcast.
Yeah, okay.
Anyway, and what you said is so important because this Appraisal Modernization Act affects everybody. And what we testified about, in essence, affects everybody as well. And that is the FHFA paper 2407 that said only 10% of all appraisals utilize market conditions adjustments. And I just took the math and went the other direction. And if only 10% is utilizing market conditions adjustments, that means 90% are not using market conditions adjustments. So that means 90% of all appraisals that are conducted are not accurate. And the reason for that is that they do not contain market conditions adjustments or time adjustments. So that is the essence of everything that's going on, affecting the entire appraisal industry. And that landscape goes past color. But in the study, it talks about how it disproportionately impacts Black and brown communities, to the point of 67 to 70% of undervaluation and appraisal bias could be solved through market conditions adjustments. So again, I do not believe the appraisers have malintent. What I do believe is the appraisers are miseducated, and that miseducation is outdated and what was the essence of my testimony. And I testified under Consumer Protection Act as well as safety and soundness. And so let's couple that with the recent mandate from the president on March 13th in the access to mortgage credit, Section 6 of that executive order is appraisal modernization. And the biggest part of appraisal modernization is the fact that he's calling for a national license, which is needed and necessary in order to modernize the appraisal process and for once make the uniform standards of professional appraisal practice actually uniform. The issue is appraisers as well as the community are going to have to fight for it. It's not a heavy lift. All they have to do is let their legislators know that they accept appraisal modernization as it stands. And that's what we support at the 10,000 Appraisers Foundation. And that's what we will be advocating for. So it truly does modernize the appraisal process. And it's not going to happen overnight. So those are the things that I testified about. And those are also the things that we'll talk about today in the radio show. And those are also the issues and topics that I included in the supplemental addendum that I am continuing and that I will actually turn in for the Federal Record tomorrow.
Wow. But you did a good job when you were speaking before them. And as you said, that 2.5 minutes that you spoke before them was represented by years and years, and especially more recently, a lot of time spent coming up with those.
So it was a recognition of 40 years of appraisal experience. And again, my career predates the Appraisal Foundation. It predates Dodd-Frank. It predates FIREA. It also was a time where appraisers got to keep 90% of their income from appraising, and they had direct relationships with the lenders. So fast forward, appraisal management companies come on board, and since the Appraisal Foundation and appraisal management companies, the ARC recent report in 2024 states that appraisers only get 35 to 45% of their fees now. So again, appraisers are going to have to fight if they want to get their fees, and this Appraisal Modernization Act is one way to get their fees back.
That's impressive. It's impressive what you do in terms of you are trying to help the appraisal industry. You are trying to help the homeowner, the property owner, and you're trying to help appraisers themselves through all of the work you do.
Well, I'm kind of in a unique position, Rick, because I've been an appraiser for 40 years, but I also been a black man for 60 years. So I have a unique perspective on the appraisal, and I consider both of them family. And once I started off advocating for black and brown communities with reconsideration of value. So this was a public trust issue, but as I traveled the country, I learned that it's bigger than black. It's an appraisal. It's an American problem, Rick. Right now, you have 7th generation white farmers in Appalachia losing their land, and they're being undervalued. You have 4th, and a lot of these folks, their land and their family land predates the Civil War. And so then in the Black Belt, you have black families with 4 and 5 generations of heirs property losing their land. And again, the impact in that community is disproportionate, and it is the number one wealth generator, but also the number one wealth extractor in the black community in the Black Belt through heirs property. So I have been able to see, witness, and educate, and that's what I testified to. So when people were asking me, what about my testimony? I stand by every single word. But to your point, the testimony was based on 40 years of experience. But the other piece, outgrowth of it, came from last year when I was in Kentucky at the Appraisal Foundation meeting. I presented at the end for 3 minutes, and I was asked how I would fix reconsideration of value to make it more substantive? And I didn't have a good answer. I didn't feel like I had the answer that the moment deserved or required. So I actually kind of froze and didn't have anything. And I just went back to the lab and all year and I worked on it. And my testimony, those 2.5 minutes, was what I came up with. So you take 40 years of experience, 1 year of working on a solution, and then 2.5 minutes to explain it. Luckily, we have the supplemental record, which I introduced before. And in that supplemental record, I submitted codification of reconsideration of value, um, the creation of a federal appraisal enforcement authority, something that actually has the ability to administer appraisal discipline across the country, which calls for a uniform license. We asked for that as well, and then the methodology in order to implement this across the country is the Land Grant Appraisal Modernization Act, which is a white paper that I wrote on how to implement it. So I'm excited about being able to turn in everything to be added to the supplemental record this week as well. So that's what I've been doing since we actually saw each other last and in person. And it's been extremely busy, and it doesn't look like it's going to slow down. As you know, we have a very busy week coming up here.
Yep. Yep, you do. Let me ask you a dumb question, which that's why I'm here. I'm an expert at dumb questions. But I find it so fascinating in this appraisal industry that you were talking to this board about these items you mentioned. But where does that control come? Who runs the system? Who runs the system that tells appraisers what the teachings, the learning process, the regulatory process? Who runs that? Is it the government? As a consumer, who do I need to talk to? Do I said we need to do something about this? Who runs it? Thaddaus, just tell us right now who runs it. Who's in control?
So that's part of the problem, Rick. Actually, that is the problem. Let me just start with Congress runs it, and so they passed FIREA and Dodd-Frank, and so they gave, supposedly authority was given to the appraisal subcommittee. Under the appraisal subcommittee is the appraisal foundation.
But is the appraisal foundation a government entity?
No, it is not a government entity.
Okay.
It's a nonprofit 501c3 with authorization from Congress to write uniform standards of professional appraisal practice. And
so do they do the training as well? They write the standards. Do they do the training?
They write the standards, and they have started getting into the training. They specifically use USPAP, which is, again, Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practice, which all appraisers have to follow and have to take, and they don't have a choice in the matter. What they don't have is enforcement authority. And so, but all the enforcement authority goes through 55 different jurisdictions. That's the 50 states and 5 territories. And the appraisal subcommittee was supposed to have authorization over them, but they have no enforcement power. All they have the power to do is make suggestions. And so basically what you have is an industry that has zero accountability. And that is a problem for everybody, including the industry, because there lacks continuity in the education. Now, if you look at recently, the Appraisal Foundation Appraisal Qualifications Board commissioned a study which said all requirements, basically it came down to a single license. Everybody was taking the same test. So now let me back up. They didn't say it was a single license. It was a single test. So everybody takes the same test. Everybody has the same requirements. The problem is they're administered differently across the country based on the states. So what the Appraisal Modernization Act does is makes one license and will actually make the appraisal process uniform for the first time ever, which
nationally.
yeah, naturally, because now, but it needs a little bit of help, and that's what I submitted. The Federal Appraisal Enforcement Authority. That that would give the authority to administer discipline and have accountability for the profession. And with that, the number one tool that we have in consumer protection right now is reconsideration of value. And again, reconsideration of value is already a law that's on the books. And it's on the books for the Veteran Administration, where they have a 3-tier process that they have utilized since 2003. All I'm saying is this process should be extended to the American public across all federally backed transactions. That would be the consumer protection as well as the enforcement authority in order to make that happen. The reason that's so important is because if you look at FHFA paper 2407, it says only 10% of all appraisals utilize market conditions adjustments. Well, if only 10% is utilizing them, that means 90% is not utilizing them. And so that means 90% of the appraisals are already inaccurate. But what you can do to mitigate that is utilize reconsideration of value. And the VA has the most robust process. It's the gold standard, bar none, in this particular segment of the industry. And with that, I won't even say with this segment of the industry, with the appraisal industry as a whole, the VA has the most independent appraisal process. First and foremost, they protect the veteran. And with the current reconsideration of value as it's constituted, the evidentiary burden is being placed on the consumer. Well, it shouldn't be on the consumer. It should be on the lender as well as the appraiser. And that's where it is now. And under the consumer protection, I believe that protection should extend to all Americans, not just a segregated class, which is the veterans. So they enjoy that benefit, first and foremost, as they should. But I would like to see it codified and utilized across all federal-related transactions, as well as making it the burden of the appraiser and the lender to, as far as right now, it's considered a courtesy, and it doesn't have any teeth and it doesn't have any enforcement, and you get a lot of pushback from appraisers. But again, I don't believe the appraisers have malintent. I believe the appraisers are miseducated, which is demonstrated and evidenced by that 90% failure rating that was illustrated in FHFA 2407.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I taught school for 33 years too, and as a teacher, I got to tell you, where does that 90% error come from? You know, that I make that clear to those folks of us who are listening on the radio, and we're at home and we're a homeowner and we're trying to figure this all out. Where does that 90% loss come from, and who's responsible for it? It's not actually the appraisers. If I'm doing a job, I want to know how to do my job, and I want to do it the best I can.
Well, again, it's ultimately it's the appraiser's responsibility, but then it's the education. There's a complete and total miseducation. As you know, the market is, or maybe you don't know, but the market is constantly moving. The market is fluid. So it's always in motion, and it's not static. What that FHFA paper recognizes is nobody is making those market conditions adjustments. And I think it's because they don't know how to make the market conditions adjustments. A few years back, Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae required market conditions adjustments on a supplemental addendum form. But because nobody would make the adjustments, they quit requiring it, and they went to something that's called collateral underwriter. Now, the collateral underwriter tells them whether or not things are moving accordingly. So it gives them an opportunity, but that's another opportunity for that appraisers kind of missed the boat and lost part of the industry to AI. And that's going to be a real impact, because AI is here and it's not going anywhere. So a part of the Appraisal Modernization Act calls for just those sorts of things to utilize and explore automated valuation models. And these are all tools that can be utilized by the appraiser, but the appraiser has to know how to utilize them. And again, we wrote a series of articles called "The Miseducation of the Appraiser," which is actually about to go into a book that I should be finishing here within the next 30 days. And I'm really, I'm really thankful to be able to do this work. And it's kind of like my life's work coming together. And I promise you, I didn't go looking for this. It came looking for me. And every place that I go and every place I speak, I've been invited. So that's been an interesting sort of revelation. But to look at the number of people that we have been able to help has been extremely gratifying. And I know we're already into this thing 20 minutes, but I want to send a happy birthday shout out to one of my childhood friends, Sean Griffith. He had a 60th birthday party on Friday, and there were a lot of people from Cincinnati that live in Atlanta that came. Actually, it was a happy hour, and there was a lot of people that came down from Cincinnati. So I got to see a lot of familiar faces. And one of my old college classmates, Ant Jenkins, he was just telling everybody about my work. And so I had more conversations about my 2.5 minutes of testimony, and it was a little bit embarrassing, but I was up for the task, and it was just so good to see so many people that I don't get to see on a regular basis. Greg Dix, he was in town. Marty Floyd, Gerald Mann, Keena Jackson, Kelly Davis. Who else? Daphne Bledsoe. I went to her and our brother. Me and her brother went to school. So just a lot of folks brought up a lot of memories, and a lot of good times, and to be able to talk about this work and for them to kind of give me an attaboy, that felt good, and kind of was like it was embarrassing, but at the same time it was rewarding to know that they had been paying attention and looking at my work.
That's great. That's great. That's fun too. It's fun to have that kind of recognition it just comes to you. But Thaddeus, traveling with you and going to some major events, I mean, attended by hundreds of people. And sometimes some of these organizations are very nice, but only allow you a few minutes to speak sometimes. But out of that few minutes that you speak, sometimes you're a featured speaker. I don't mean to minimize any of that, and you do a wonderful job. But even on those where you get a few minutes, all of a sudden, people are asking you questions. You're over in a corner surrounded by people who are wanting to talk about heirs property or reconsideration of value and all the things that you do. And I just stand back and I smile at that, because it just shows that people are interested, whether they're consumers or appraisers or whatever.
And it's pretty interesting, and it crosses the entire landscape. It's something that affects everybody, but most people don't know how it affects them or impacts them. And the problem is everybody thinks somebody else is taking care of it, and that's kind of what I just try to bring awareness. And you can't fix something that you're not aware of even exists. So. Yeah. Once we bring the exposure, that's what we do when we're traveling the country, and then we bring expansion on. And I try not to show up with just talking about the problem. We also have worked on a solution. So again, my 2.5 minutes of testimony, which is crazy. That was to your point, that was an outgrowth of when we went to you and I were in Washington D.C. At the FDIC policy summit. Where I was given 5 minutes to speak and on Capitol Hill, and that 5 minutes turned into 30 minutes. That 30 minutes turned into an invitation to speak at the Federal Reserve. So again, it don't take that long.
Those things did not come because you just ignored the clock and took extra time. Those things come because people started asking you questions.
Oh, absolutely. So what I try to do is stay on point and task. And that's one of the things that you and Anita helped me to be able to do in my presentations, is to stay on point. And so if I got 2.5 minutes, I'm going to respect the 2.5 minutes. But what I found is when I do that, everybody has questions. So once I start to answer the questions, then that starts to bring clarity. So, and again, what I spoke on at the Federal Reserve EGRPRA hearing was 2.5 minutes. And I stand on every second of those 2.5 minutes. And that outgrowth from that question that I was asked last year in Kentucky was, how would I fix reconsideration of value? And when I just went back to the lab and worked on it, the first thing I started with was reconsideration of value because it's the most immediate. And so what I submitted was codification of reconsideration of value, utilizing the 3-tier model that's already in existence, that's already a law utilized by the Veterans Administration. So that's not a reach. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. All we have to do is expand who is eligible for that. So the veterans have been utilizing it since 2003, but I believe it should go across all federal related transactions, residential and commercial, and I'll give that same consumer protection to the American public. So that's the first thing that I worked on. So once I started going down that rabbit hole, I looked at the other thing is that there is no enforcement authority. So that was very troubling. And so a lot of people think that the ASC has enforcement authority over the Appraisal Foundation. It doesn't. According to the Department of Justice, it can only make suggestions. And so since 2020, there's been a direct split between the Appraisal Subcommittee and the Appraisal Foundation. So
okay, wait a minute now. So now revisit for me and us ordinary folks. There's been a split between these two. How I looking at it from my point, you can't have a split between those two. One is supposed to be there to help guard or work the other, isn't it?
It's supposed to be. In a perfect world, I believe that's what Congress had intended. However, that is not the case how it is currently constituted.
Because nobody really can accept any consequences or has to, right?
Again, the whole industry has zero accountability when it comes to enforcement. It's enforced in the states over 55 jurisdictions. So the Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practice is only uniform in name.
You understand me kind of doing that cynical chuckle when I hear that, because I forget how much the last appraisal I had on my house was, but it cost a pretty good penny to have it done.
Well, the other part of that is you think that money was going to the appraiser. Now, before the Appraisal Foundation.
You're going to surprise me here again, aren't you?
90% of that money went to the appraiser.
Okay. Since
the Appraisal Foundation, in this iteration of USPAP, appraisers, according to ARC, again, I don't make these numbers up, Rick. ARC is an appraisal research advocacy group. They did a study in 2024 that stated appraisers only get 35 to 45% of the appraisal revenue. They do the research, they drive to the property, they do the inspection, they do the analysis, but they only get 35% of the fee. The rest of the fee goes to appraisal management companies. And this is part of the problem. It's fee suppression, and it's part of the appraiser's frustration. But the Appraisal Modernization Act goes a long way to help fix and mitigate that, but appraisers are going to have to fight for it. And it's not a heavy lift because the executive order makes it the law. So what we as appraisers have to do is get to our legislators and tell them that we accept appraisal modernization, that is what we want. And that will actually modernize. That's one of the first steps in modernizing the appraisal process. However, that step needs a little bit of help. That help comes from the Federal Appraisal Enforcement Authority, an agency that would actually have appraisal enforcement authority and accountability.
An agency that does not exist today.
It does not exist right now.
Okay.
So that's one that needs to be created for the long term. So that way, now you have an accountability mechanism to administer these issues or administer the discipline as well as the education, because the current educational construct, the way it is a failure based on FHFA 2407. That says only 10% of all appraisals utilize market conditions adjustments. Well, that means 9 out of 10 or 90% don't utilize market conditions adjustments, which is a safety and soundness issue for the banking regulators, which is what I brought up in my testimony. So the other piece is that enforcement authority can be the mechanism that actually enforces reconsideration of value once it's made a law through codification. The law already exists. All we have to do is expand it to all property types with federal related transactions and something that the consumer can participate in. And that's necessary because, as we can see, the accuracy of appraisals are not there. And so until we can fully retrain the next generation on how to measure market velocity, reconsideration of value is the tool for wealth preservation as opposed to wealth extraction.
Very good. So, because the government has given a lot of authority in a way to the National Appraisal Foundation, they are the ones who could make these suggestions, who could make these improvements, right? Or am I wrong?
So it's the Appraisal Foundation.
The Appraisal Foundation. Okay.
They could make these suggestions. I haven't seen where that has actually happened.
What are they? What is the Appraisal Foundation? I say national because just to refer to that as this is the governing, this is kind of the authority in the country for this. Whatever authority they have or whatever little authority, they're the one group that has some. So are they currently involved in these?
They are involved in something. They're updating the appraisal qualifications, calling for a high school diploma. They are updating appraisal standards. They are working on some things, but I have yet to hear them address the appraisal fee suppression, as well as the FHFA paper on how to modernize the appraisal process through evidence-based, data-driven analysis. I think they have said some things about it, but there is no push. Nobody is screaming about it. But they do talk about public trust. So that's a whole other issue that we'll get into a little bit later, and one that Dr. Wendy Mohammed brought up that I found to be fascinating last week in our interview. Her question was exactly what public are they referring to when they talk about public trust, seeing how that the public is not a monolithic public, and seeing how appraisal fee suppression and appraisers getting 35% of their fees in some instances doesn't appear as though they're doing a great job representing appraisers. And then if we look at consumers, it doesn't look like we're doing a great job with that either, with 9 out of 10 appraisals not having market conditions adjustments. So
where did that information come from? Where did
that came from? FHFA paper 2407.
So this is not just somebody's random thing they came up with.
No. It's not a random thought. And again, everything that we do in the modernization process, we utilize data science, evidence-based, data-driven analysis. So you will not hear me bringing anything up that I do not have data and support for.
So one thing you mentioned in the whole thing that they are working on and supporting and being a teacher, this makes me think you mentioned a high school diploma, which I actually in broadcasting, I was a vocational teacher. So, I get to run around in that vocational area. I can see that a high school diploma, yes, but there has to be a lot of training beyond that. And I would think, especially because you're talking about AI, we don't need to be afraid of AI. We need to learn how to use it so that we have control over it. But, your data science and all of that. And you speak to George, his last name, George Dell, who's wonderful. But data science and all of this, yes, a high school diploma, but there has to be a lot of other training to be able to utilize all of these methods and reconsideration of value and all these other things, right?
Oh, absolutely. So You can do it with a high school diploma, but the barrier to entry has been having to work for free. And so we have solved some of that with our appraisal apprenticeship program. So we have the only appraisal apprenticeship program in the country certified by the U.S. Department of Labor. So that's part of the work that we're doing now, and part of the reason I'm writing and trying to raise funds to implement this program across the country. But also, that was a big part of the 10,000 Appraisers Land Grant Appraisal Modernization Act that I wrote. And what that does is that covers all communities across the country utilizing the land grant apparatus that's already in existence to be a distribution model that impacts all communities. So that is something that we are stridently working on, and hopefully getting support to be able to push that mission forward.
That's great. That's great, because as a teacher, I say, kudos to all the things you're doing in that realm. Also, as a teacher, I look at some of the things you've said here about the way the industry is working, is that I would think being an appraiser would be a fantastic career to have. But the way things are right now, some of the numbers that are there and are verifiable, I would think very smart young people would say, well, now, wait a minute. I would love to do this, but I need to make a good living, and I want to be professional with what I do. So I'll choose another career.
Yes. And you are absolutely right. And in the future, we're not going to need as many appraisers just because of artificial intelligence. They can do a lot of the research, and a lot of the smaller guys can publish reports like they're bigger arms, because the research is right there at your fingertips. So the key is being able to utilize the technology and embrace it. And a lot at this point, over 65% or over 80% of all appraisers are over 60 years old. So they are rapidly aging out, and less than 7% are under 35. So the tide is definitely shifting. The key is to train those that are coming in, so as we go through this transformation, that they're well positioned to be able to measure market velocity and those things that impact market value.
Okay. Very good. Very good. Well, wow. You just continue to enlighten me, but I do have to go back and tell you about my appraisal that I had. I don't remember how much it cost, but it was very expensive. But there was one added little treat to it, that the appraiser, who was an older gentleman, his wife also was very famous for making these wonderful homemade noodles and package them, selling them in stores in the area. She was well known for that. I knew the name, and I got a couple free packages of noodles with my appraisal. So there was a benefit there.
Again, and this is the profession that I've been blessed to be able to do. And I can't even tell you the number of amazing people that I have met coast to coast doing appraisals, as well as reconsideration of value. And again, we started off in 2022 with the Terry Horton case as a reconsideration of value that went to the National Community Reinvestment Coalition. From there, it went to HUD, and it went to the Justice Department. So again, as a consumer protection, it is the number one tool in wealth preservation. So as I tour the country, as a matter of fact, we got a pretty big week coming up here.
Let's say you're going to be busy this week.
Well, tomorrow, which when this airs, by the time this airs, we'll be done. But I'll be at the Atlanta Federal Reserve tomorrow as part of their heirs property training. And then Tuesday and Wednesday, the continuation of that will be heirs property from the Southern Rural Development Center. Mississippi State is putting on an heirs property training here. And as you know, we wrote the 3-hour land valuation course for the advanced heirs property training. So I'll be visiting and participating in that this week here in Atlanta. And then on Saturday, we'll be in Mississippi at the Mississippi Minority Appraisers Alliance with Carolyn and Chris Jones and the wonderful people of Mississippi. I enjoy being invited there. So it's lots of good food, good times, and good people. So I'm looking forward to us going down there, presenting, and actually doing interviews while we're down there.
Yeah.
So
That's always fun because we get to do interviews with some amazing people when we attend these events. I love it. I love it.
oh yeah, and we learn so much. And again, just building the network up, working on the consumer protection, modernizing the appraisal process. Now we got deep into the show, and I still haven't covered the 5 pillars that I talked about in front of the Federal Reserve. I covered a couple of them. I talked about the Federal Appraisal Enforcement Authority. Um, the second was the codification of the reconsideration of value. Uh, the third was the Land Grant Appraisal Modernization Act. We also talked about the National Appraisal License. I guess we did cover everything in here. And then the one that everybody keeps asking me about is I call for the abolishment of the Appraisal Foundation. Well, actually,
Oh,
huh?
oh,
Yeah. So I got a lot of questions about that. And yeah, I did say that. And actually, when I did my submission, that was kind of at the end of it. But I didn't want it to get lost in that 2.5 minutes. And actually, that's the natural outgrowth if everything that I suggested is implemented. Because again, um, the Economic Growth and Regulatory Paperwork Reduction Act, it called and asked for the idea is to cut the red tape. And what it asked for was rules that are outdated, unnecessary, and overly burdensome. And in my opinion, that would be the Appraisal Foundation. So that's what I testified to for the Congressional Federal Record. And again, that was the question that they asked me how I would modernize it. And that's how I would modernize it. So we are working hard and diligently. And that was before the Appraisal Modernization Act. But the Appraisal Modernization Act, through the access to mortgage credit, is the way. And so we will be having our first appraisal policy summit here in Atlanta, June 19th and 20th. So I'm excited about putting that together. And I think probably we'll start touring somewhere in June or after that. We got a lot of work to do in a short time to do it, to be able to pull this appraisal policy summit off. But the Appraisal Modernization Act is what the industry needs, but the appraisers are going to have to fight for it. So the call to action is for every appraiser to tell their legislators that they support the Appraisal Modernization Act. Every consumer that's been affected by appraisals or wants a part of the American dream of home ownership should tell their legislators that they support the Appraisal Modernization Act. It will actually impact them today and tomorrow. But currently, as it stands, we're using 1933 appraisal methodology that doesn't support today's ecosystem. So that's why appraisal modernization is necessary, and that's what I testified to at the Federal Reserve. And it was an honor and a privilege that I was the only appraiser in the country selected to speak.
that's impressive. And I did get to see when I was pulling out your part of it, I did get to see there were some impressive other people there speaking on behalf of.
Oh yeah. So it was quite ironic that economist William Michael Cunningham spoke, as well as Don Cravens on the National Minority Supplier Development Corporation, formerly the National Minority Supplier Development Corporation. We all three spoke at the FDIC Summit in Washington, D.C. Several weeks ago. And Bill and I actually shared a panel together where we talked about California and the houses that were burned down and being able to replace them. So Bill and I were also together on Capitol Hill, where the 5 minutes turned into 30 minutes, and which also became the outgrowth of me being invited. Bill was also one of the original people to encourage me to start writing. He and Kevin Kimball of FDIC, as well as Pulitzer Prize winner Melvin Claxton. And so I've always been afraid of writing because of my grammar, but now they got tools to be able to work with me and my grammar. So I'm getting a little bit more confident with every article. And this week has been a whirlwind week too. I wrote a couple of articles. One in particular was Code Red, and it was, did the Appraisal Foundation order the Code Red? And that was an outgrowth of me being up watching a few good men after out doing inspections all day. I was exhausted and went to bed early, and I found myself up in the middle of the morning. But also, I wrote another article called "The Five Commandments," and that was based. And basically, the question was, can the Appraisal Modernization Act, Section 6, resurrect the Appraisal Foundation? And I actually believe it can. So we can find those articles on our Substack or on our um, on my LinkedIn newsletter. So I'm excited. It's been a lot. And the other thing is, when I started writing, I was really just writing for myself to get everything out of my head and just on the paper. And that was from the encouragement of Kevin Kimball, Bill Cunningham, and Melvin Claxton. And actually, you've been helpful because you always talk about how people can't understand what I'm talking about, and so this gives me a chance to break it down and make it more bite sized. It even helps me in my presentations to be more succinct because sometimes I get to talking and I want to get everything into that moment, and it doesn't allow people to be able to digest it. So instead of giving it to them with a straw, I'm shooting a fire hose. But now I'm just taking those little small sips so folks can get them into the straw. And I still felt, I didn't feel rushed in my presentation, but I did feel rushed because I wanted to make sure I hit all of the points and I didn't want anything to get lost. And I was extreme. That's the most nervous that I've been since I've been speaking.
I love it though. I love it.
So it's constantly challenging, and even at the at Sean Griffith's party, somebody was telling me that how much they enjoyed the podcast and the radio show, and how much better I have gotten. And I was laughing because we have gotten better, but that's been because of your production, you suggesting things that I need to do in order to improve, the improvement and suggestions that Anita made. My brother, who is always clowning me, talking about, will you please just shut up and let the other people talk? I'm really tired of hearing you talk. So I'm doing a lot better job of trying to listen and just and we don't have a huge following, but my whole goal was to practice to get us to where we needed to be. Now we can start trying to work on driving the numbers as we work on getting acceptance nationally of this Appraisal Modernization Act.
Yeah. Well, I think, if anybody listens to the radio show here, they especially go to the YouTube channel and easily, or your Facebook page, and see the programs that you do. They could go back and listen to them because they are fascinating on a lot of differences. Also, you have a lot of programs on the civil rights era related to, land ownership, property ownership, and all of that.
Oh yeah, because
things like that. So
yeah, this heirs property traverses the whole landscape, and in the southern states it's the land, but in the northern states it's housing. So and it's different for each state, municipality. The wealth extraction or loss in heirs property is basically through title, but the mechanism is the appraisal. So that's what I actually bring to the party, and the lens that I'm able to put on it. So it brings it all together. And so when I'm in these communities and I'm talking to urban and rural communities and the impact, the reception is always warm, and filled with gratitude, which actually fuels me to keep on doing this work because it is making a difference.
Yeah, it is. It is. And I when I was talking about your YouTube channel and so forth, I think one of the things we've talked about is beginning to do some programming that's more related to the homeowner, the property owner, the consumer, so that they know more about this entire system and how it works. And also, because a lot of times you're speaking to your appraisal industry, but at the same time, I think you need to be speaking to the appraisers themselves. But it's a complicated industry, made complicated for unnecessary reasons, I think.
Yeah, but I think and with just like everything else, AI is able to bring people valuations. You can get a Zillow or a Zestimate, um, Redfin. Everybody publishes some sort of valuation report. Now that's where you start to get into consumer protections and conversations, because every reconsideration of value is not necessarily a reconsideration of value. There's been, shoot, I would probably say at least 60 to 70% of the reconsideration of values I do, there is no finding. So it's based on a Zestimate or some other automated valuation model tool that people utilize in order to measure their property's value. And it was just inaccurate. So once we are able to establish that, but even in those cases, the people feel better. So they feel like they're not being taken advantage of. So that builds consumer confidence and public trust as well.
So here's an interesting. We've got a couple minutes left in this whole era. Most people are getting homes appraised because they're buying it or refinancing it. How much pressure or push does banking institutions or financial institutions have to do with appraisals at all?
I
Do
mean,
they?
the whole banking industry is based on appraisals or
Right.
the security, the collateralization. So a lot of times the loans are based on those. And if you have a 90% inaccuracy rate, well, that appears to be a high risk to your loan portfolio. So that is one of the things that the GSEs are actually doing to modernize the appraisal process. So it's all about being able to sell the loans on the secondary market. So again, I know I'm going down the rabbit hole here, but that modernization process is real, and they're now offering appraisal waivers. So as well, the new 3.6 UAD appraisal form has been out since January, and it's supposed to be in full production use in November this year. But along with that is the uniform appraisal data collection set, which is supposed to be in full use in June. And that's the basis of what they utilize for appraisal waivers. And so I believe in 24, the loan to value ratio was 80% for appraisal waivers. And I think 10% all the transactions utilized appraisal waivers. Last year, that number went up to 20% to be able to utilize appraisal waivers. And the loan to value ratio went from 80 to 90. So with appraisal modernization, that number is only going to grow. And so what that does is it opens the door for data collectors, which is a natural outgrowth and entry level appraisal position, in my opinion, where all you have to do is be able to measure and take pictures of houses. And so most appraisers don't want to do that anyway. And that is part of what is the fee compression, but it's also an opportunity to open a door for people to learn and earn, or earn while they learn. So that's one of the things that we have also been advocating for in this process.
That's great, because when you talked about we may not need as many appraisers, well, but might need more backup, other additional things that go along with it as careers as well. So
again, that's all a part of what the president's executive order does in Section 6 of the Appraisal Modernization Act: explore alternatives to modernize the appraisal process. And that's exactly what the testimony did and what we will be doing. And so I know we said a lot, or I said a lot And then
I just ask dumb questions. I know all your people say, just get that guy behind the camera and don't ever let him out again.
no,
But
man,
but I'm
everybody,
interested,
everybody loves you, and your camera work
I'm interested.
and your video production work is impeccable. So let's give you a quick promo here. Was that the Atlanta? Go ahead. What's the name of the company?
Oh, Atlanta Video Network. We came up with that stupid name from something else we were doing, and we just left it, But we get to do a lot of neat programs here in Atlanta for a lot of great clients, all the way from working with Corvettes weekly to some things that the Ambassador Andrew Young Foundation's doing to the SCLC, Martin Luther King's organization. Just lots of neat things in Atlanta.
Yeah, I'm just happy that we could be on the menu of all the great things and work that you do. And we actually met, I believe, originally it was at the FDIC Policy Summit.
You were going to be there. We met at the Southern Christian Leadership Conference on Auburn Avenue, Martin Luther King. You were doing a program there. You were meeting Dr. Steele, and he said, well, we're getting ready to shoot a program here in a moment. Come on and be on here. And that's the first time. And I thought, wow, this Dawson guy, he's talking about some real stuff here. So, and then I did get to go.
Interview we did with Dr. Steele at the Southern Christian Leadership Conference.
Yep. But that led to me getting to go to Washington with you when you did the signing at the Department of Labor for the apprenticeship program, which is still just an unbelievable thing. We don't talk about that enough, but this is remarkable.
Well, we will be doing a lot of talking about it here in the near future. We'll be talking about it at the Appraisal Policy Summit here on June 19th and 20th. And we definitely want all appraisers to come out to the Appraisal Policy Summit so we can hear what you have to say. We'll be putting out more information about that. We want the community, if you've ever been impacted by an appraisal, residential, commercial, rural, urban, we want you to come learn about it, the process and how it impacts you and how you can utilize reconsideration of value as a consumer protection tool. If you have heirs property or estate planning, we want you to come out and we can talk to you and educate you about that as well as what needs to be done. So all of these are opportunities that we bring to the public. And again, we build public trust, and we don't just sit back and wait for the public to come to us. We go to the public, and that actually has worked very well for us.
Yep. And it's been hard for me to learn, and I still have a hard time taking it, that all these kinds of things have to start with policy at the government level. And I go back to one thing I always think about is, the civil rights acts that were made, voting rights acts. Lyndon Johnson, President Johnson at that time, and talking to Martin Luther King, he was all for them. He was for them. He wanted it, but he turned to him and said, but you have to make us do it.
And again, when there's no accountability, you have to make people do it and make them accountable. And so again, I can't emphasize enough how important this Appraisal Modernization Act is and how appraisers are going to have to fight for this profession if they really want it. And for me, the fight I've been fighting the whole time. So this is not a new fight for me. I had to fight to become appraiser, and I had to fight to stay an appraiser for 40 years. And we'll be talking about that a little bit later.
Yeah, we'll do that. Hey, anyway, Thaddaus, you've got 1 minute left on the program, so I'm going to bug out of here, and you remind people where you're going to be, especially they can come and see you in Mississippi next weekend. So it was great to be on the program with you.
All right, thanks, Rick. I appreciate it. And we're going to close. Please like, subscribe, share if you enjoyed what we had to say today. This week we'll be on Monday. I'll be at the Atlanta Federal Reserve in their heirs property clinic. Tuesday and Wednesday, I'll be in Atlanta as well with the Southern Rural Development Center and their heirs property training, trainer series, which we wrote I wrote the 3-hour land valuation course for the 21-hour trainers advanced series. We won't be teaching that this week. And then on Saturday, I'll be in Mississippi at the Mississippi Minority Appraisers Alliance, their annual meeting, which is really exciting. So again, like, subscribe, share, and thank you for coming to Thaddaus Dawson Speaks, Liberation Through Valuation, where soul meets soil.
Don't get left